All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 196 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. My name is Billy Bob. I've got my regular co-host, Ian Kummer, streaming live from his dacha in Crimea. It's like 9 a.m. for me. What is it, 7 p.m., Ian?
Yes, it's 7 p.m. here.
7 p.m. in Crimea. So our title for our 196th episode is Will the Strait of Hormuz be Trump's Gallipoli? And I have been informed that Gallipoli was a military campaign that did not fare so well. And we have, Ian recently wrote a great article on his blog at thereadingjunkie.com, just kind of contrasting what happened in World War I and why Gallipoli ended up happening and why it turned out to be a little bit of a disaster. And we're going to talk about the parallels between that and, what's going on right now. But is there anything I should add to that, Ian, before I let you explain to people?
Well, yes. So the Dardanelles campaign happens because it's the Ottoman Empire that joined the Central Powers in World War I. And what's actually interesting about that, one interesting diplomatic parallel, even just right from the beginning, is that the Ottoman Empire was, they joined Germany and the Central Powers, but they were to a large extent pushed into it by the bad British diplomacy. Winston Churchill was the first Sea Lord at the time. And so one thing he did was he actually went back on a deal they had with the Ottomans. The Ottomans were purchasing some old British ships. And he said, no, we're not going through the sale. So he kept the Ottomans' money, but wouldn't hand the ships over. And Germany actually agreed. It's like, well, you know what? We're your friends. We're your great friends over here in Germany. So we're going to give you some of our ships. And of course, those ships came with German officers. So that gave them a foothold in the Ottoman military. So that put the Ottomans right there. Just because the British turned the Ottomans away, it puts them in the German camp. And then the Ottomans started military conflict with Russia. Actually, there were attacks on Russian holdings in the Black Sea, and that brought the British and the French, because they were allies at the time, brought them into war against the Ottomans, and they decided the Ottomans were the underbelly of the Central Powers. That's actually what Churchill called them. He loved the underbelly concept. Italy was the underbelly in World War II, and in World War I, it was the Ottoman Empire. So they wanted to knock the Ottoman Empire right out of, right at the beginning, right, knock them out of the war by forcing the Strait and taking Constantinople. And it was believed that it's basically, it's not exactly it's not a decapitation strike, but it's a classic. We take the enemy capital, they lose, we win. It didn't happen. The straits were defended by these old border forts, and there were also mines. One of the French battleships hit a mine and sunk very quickly with most of the crew aboard, and that compelled. So you can look it up online. It's actually an interesting battle to read about, the Dardanelles campaign. And but basically the problem was they had these big old battleships, and they had large crews, hundreds, almost 1,000 people each, and they had very big crews, and they were very expensive ships. So people were scared to risk them. So you have these large, expensive weapons that they're scared to actually risk in battles, and that led to the naval attack failing. And so instead, later that year they did this big ground offensive. They amphibious landing at Gallipoli, and it actually ended in an Ottoman victory. The attack failed, and it was a huge loss of life. I forget what the total losses were, but yes. Yes,
so some obvious parallels.
300,000 military casualties, yes.
How many thousands?
There are 250 to 300,000 Allied casualties in that
Okay,
one battle.
with the ground invasion known as Gallipoli, it didn't go well, and the Allies lost hundreds of thousands of troops, basically. So the parallels to the current situation, striking, right? So the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The United States has sent over some carrier groups, some Marine Expeditionary Units, some special forces. And we don't know what Trump's plan is for those, but he is threatening to, use these troops, put boots on the ground, and open up the straits. They probably know better than to, send an expensive battleship through the strait, because, there's no way that they're going to, survive. There's no mines. I don't think Iran has mined the strait, except for maybe one small side with stationary mines to narrow the channel. I don't even know if they've done that. But they definitely have artillery they could use, or missiles or drones to, destroy any shipping that goes through there. So it would be suicide for the U.S. to try to just sail through, and so that's, people talk about taking Karga Island, but Karga Island, you have to go all the way through the strait, all the way, to the end of the strait practically, to get your troops there if you're not, if you're taking them by ship. So, it seems like these troops ostensibly are going to either be used for a ground invasion of some sort, or they're going to be, just kept far away and used to interdict, Iranian ships that so far have been able to export Iranian oil around the globe, around the planet just fine, to China specifically. So those oil exports from Iran continue to go to China during all of what's going on. They load up in Karg Island, they sail off to China, and that continues to happen. So the U.S. might want to be putting a stop to that very soon. But there's a threat. They're talking about taking islands, opening up the strait by force, which ostensibly would mean using these troops, the Marine Expeditionary Units, the special forces, to occupy the coast, the Iranian coast of the Strait of Hormuz. And so most, military analysts that I have faith in and trust in, that they're not just working for the military industrial complex, that they're telling me the truth, they say that's not going to happen. There's no military, solution to opening up the straits, and it would be suicide for these special forces, Marine Expeditionary Units, to try and unblock the strait by occupying the Iranian coast. But but what's the bigger picture? What's the bigger context of all that's taking place? How is what is going on now, fitting in with, the ultimate strategy and the bigger interests of the imperialists? Because, the Western powers are the one pushing this. Iran didn't initiate this, and there's no ostensible reason, why this is happening now, other than the fact that it's part of a broad global strategy that the West is pursuing. The interconnectedness of, number one, the Ukraine war, number two, what we saw in Venezuela, and now number three, this attack in Iraq, on the attack on Iran, and the we saw the opening salvo, two carrier groups unleashing everything they had, all their ordnance, all their munitions, dumping it on Iran. One of them leaving, and another one's coming with two other Expeditionary Unit, aircraft carriers, and they're gonna, so they're essentially reloading. They're gonna be put in place, and then they're also gonna unload, everything they have on Iran. And then what? What happens next? Iran is still standing. Iran is still firing missiles and drones at the Gulf states, at Israel, at all the Western assets. And at that point, what's the price of oil going to be? So this morning I checked, it was like $104 per barrel, which is the highest it's been ever. I mean, since this thing started. It was started at 60, and it, quickly went up to 90, and then it's been between 90 and 100. Trump has been trying very, putting a lot of effort into managing the oil market. And I think we talked last episode about how, he makes these real saber rattling claims during the weekend when the markets are closed, telling Iran, hey, if you don't surrender right now, we're going to go after your main, your biggest power plant. And then right before the markets open up, he knows that his threat was going to tank the markets. And so right before the markets open up, he puts out this lie that, no, we're in diplomacy. We're going to give them 5 more days. That 5 more days, of course, is going to be, once the markets close again, that 5 more days is up. But he's actually changed that, and now it's been 10 days. So he's trying to buy time. He's trying to make the markets calm. But at the same time, he's putting the second salvo, the second attack force in place to do whatever he's planning on doing. So the question is he planning on using these forces to, land and occupy the Iranian coast of the Strait of Hormuz to unblock it? Or is he just planning on doing another basic, large mass attack all on Iranian infrastructure, their hospitals, their schools, their energy production capacity, and just trying to really destroy them as best they can? So what are your thoughts about all of that, Ian? Or do you disagree, or do you agree? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. It would be very. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, what's an acceptable loss of manpower and equipment, in a ground invasion of Iran, and that's something I wrote in the sister post to this. On my blog and readingjunkie.com, that's why I wrote with the article that went along with this, is that, the problem with Trump is that all of his military operations so far have been a big gamble. Like Venezuela, the kidnapping Maduro was a big win for Trump, but it was also a big gamble. Because imagine if something had gone wrong, because I do personally think there was some inside help with that. It's like, how did they just fly through? I mean, that's not something that normally happens. How do you fly through over someone's capital city, like in a movie, with no one firing back? And it did feel like there was some help there that enabled them to disable and disorganize the defenders to such an extent no one even fired back. But imagine if something had gone wrong. Just imagine if one guy with a manpad, with a Stinger or something, had shot down one of those Chinooks, and that killed a whole team of people. Americans don't care about.
Well, they would have died months later in a training accident, Ian.
Well, I mean, there's limits to that, especially if it's caught in video. I mean, imagine just a helicopter. I mean, no one, because that's the problem. Americans don't care about Venezuela. They don't care about Maduro. So if that had not been a bloodless operation, let's say, 10 or even 10 Americans had died in that, people ask, why did 10 or 20 American servicemen die to kidnap this guy we don't care about in this country? We don't care about, if for a drug war that we don't care about, for, an oil embargo war that we don't care about, it would just be an outrage. Be black.
Definitely a risk. There was a risk involved. I mean, he mitigated a lot of the risk, by, like you said, probably having inside people, probably understanding all they had to deal with was the 30, Cubans. And so they probably had more than enough to deal with that. But yeah, still a risk, but a much lower risk than what's going on with Iran is the point.
And so the problem is that I don't think Trump realizes these are big risks. Like, he's just in his echo chamber surrounded by these advisors. And he's, by the way, seems like he's driven away or killed the sensible people like Charlie Kirk, was kind of one of Trump's right-hand men. He wasn't, a military strategist, obviously, but he's one of his top media guys.
Yeah.
Who is very, obviously his whole reputation is being very pro-Israel, but even Charlie Kirk was like, this is kind of crazy. And he was kind of getting turned off by the whole Israel thing and, war in the Middle East thing. And then he was assassinated under extremely strange circumstances, which a lot of people think is strange. And then, of course, there's Tucker Carlson, who's been completely sidelined and divorced from the movement. I mean, basically every
Well, you're frozen, and the minute I mention you're frozen, you usually unfreeze. Yeah, no, that's too bad. Usually you freeze for just a second and then you're back. But right now we can't hear you and you're frozen. But so I think you're making the point that in the preparation, for this, there you are. Are you able to continue your? Okay. So yeah, in the preparation for this big operation against Iran, it's totally believable that they, got rid of what's his name, Charlie Kirk, because he would have been a media giant, in opposition to what's going on. And they didn't want that headache. They didn't want him, messing with the minds of all these young people and turning them against this pro-Israel thing. So, Ian, yeah, I had to kind of take over and reinforce your point.
Thanks for stepping in. Yeah, and guys, so I am actually streaming from Crimea, and because Crimea is kind of a strange place internet-wise, so it can sometimes my connection cuts out. So I apologize. But yeah, thanks, Billy Bob. So yeah, so as I was saying, these guys, the sensible, kind of reasonable people, even if you don't agree. I mean, even if you don't agree, I don't want some of the more left-leaning people watching sort of freak out. Oh, Charlie Kirk isn't reasonable. Okay, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I wasn't a huge fan of Charlie Kirk either when he was alive. But what I mean is these are the kind of level-headed people in the Trump MAGA movement. We're pushed away from Trump, and all that's left are these hardcore fanatic, the worst people. Levin, Lindsey Graham, just the worst. Ben Shapiro, this is the worst, most war hawkish people, or chicken hawkish people you can imagine, are all that's left around Trump, and they put him in this echo chamber. So he's not even. So that's the big problem. Is he's not even aware. I don't think he's even aware that even his successful operations, like in Venezuela, came with a lot of risk. So now he's jumped into the deep end of the pool with Iran, and it's not going the way he wanted. And he feels like, I think Trump feels like he got suckered into this because no one told him that Iran could threaten U.S. assets like this. No one told him they could completely cut off the strait while letting their own guys through, their own ships through, their own friendly ships through, while cutting ours out, and destabilize the whole global market like this, or destroy our radars. I mean, I think Trump is just as blindsided as anyone else in this.
That's that's one perspective. Let me offer a counter perspective, but no, it's plausible too, and we're just speculating. I mean, one plausible counter perspective is that Trump understood that ideally Iran will surrender, and the United States will put in a government that just controls Iranian oil. Like, that would be the best case scenario, for the Western imperialists. And the degree to which Trump thought that was actually likely is really up for debate. Like, there's no telling if Trump, really believed that or not. But I think it's highly plausible that Trump was prepared that, even in the case that the best case scenario doesn't pan out, it's still going to be necessary to do because of the larger, geostrategic picture. And so if, they are not able to control, Iranian oil and have, the Gulf oil, intact, the ability for the Gulf to produce energy and export it, even if they don't have all those things, it's still better than the status quo. So, they prefer to just destroy all the energy production capacity for West Asia. That's their second best option. Their best option is to control a fully functioning Gulf and, be able to determine who gets oil from there and who doesn't. With Iran having sovereign control of their oil fields, Iran controls who gets Iranians oil. And so ideally, number one, they're going to just take out Iran. Next best scenario, they're just going to have to destroy all of the export capacity of the Gulf region. And that will, allow them to control the rest of the world's oil supplies. So, United States is a big producer of oil. Obviously, the United States controls United States energy. Venezuela is another big oil producer, and ostensibly, based on the success that you talked about Trump having earlier, the U.S. to a degree controls Venezuelan oil and ostensibly can tell Venezuela to stop giving oil to China. I'm not sure to what extent that's happened. I've heard reports that, Venezuelan oil going to China has, gone down a bunch. Obviously, we know it doesn't go to Cuba anymore. Mexican oil doesn't go to Cuba anymore. And so the United States is able to assert control over Venezuelan oil to a certain extent. With the threat that if Venezuela says no to the U.S., that the U.S. is going to do, an assassination bombing of the entire Venezuelan government. So what we see is the United States trying to control global oil, global energy supplies, in preparation for a larger, conflagration, namely against Russia and China, right? So we've been, targeting. Did we talk about this last show? I know I've been talking about it a lot, and I hate to just repeat.
And it's same. It's kind of the same wall we hit with our discussions, because I don't see a logical benefit to that. I mean, because the whole U.S. order, the whole petrodollar system that replaced the gold standard in 1974. If that gets upended, I mean, it's going to hurt our system. It's going to hurt the U.S. system more than it's ever going to hurt China, definitely Russia. It's going because the Arabs are, the most important group holding that system together. I mean, all those Gulf states, even if the war ended right now and the Strait opens right now, every one of those states is going to be left wondering, well, what did I pay all of that money for those U.S. weapons for? What did I, and they do have to kind of go against their own populations. These Shia majority populations don't like being aligned with Israel against Iran. There's Sunni pseudo governments. They're fine with it because they were paid off, so they're fine with it. But they have to kind of go against their own populations, which is it's politically uncomfortable. So it's more difficult than just saying we're against Israel, right? That'd be the politically easiest thing for them to do, but we pay them to be with Israel. I don't see losing a war with Iran something like 12-dimensional chess, or like something they were deliberately trying to do, or destroying the energy infrastructure. I mean, that's going to hurt our system. It's going to hurt the American system more than anyone else. It's going to leave the U.S. military looking very weak. If we walk away from this with anything but a victory, it's going to leave the U.S. military looking very weak. It's like, it's not even Russia destroying American, because even with the destroying American equipment in Ukraine, it's like, oh well, it's Ukrainians are dumb Slavs, they're lazy, they're stupid, they're not doing it right. They're using Soviet tactics. That's like their favorite talking point. Oh, they're Soviet tactics. That's why they're losing. Yeah. But there's going to be no excuse here, because it's the American military, and it's not even Russia or China that's at least like a nuclear power. It's against Iran, which is, a Middle Eastern country, which we look down on even more than China or Russia, these Asiatic Russians. So I don't see how's this going to benefit the system. I mean, if the petrodollar collapses, I mean, I don't even know what that would do to the U.S. economy. If bunch of the Gulf states like, you know what, we're gonna listen to Iran and just trade in Chinese yuan. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, we're gonna use Chinese currency now. Dump the petrodollar. 90% of the world's oil transactions are done in dollars. If a bunch of them, I mean, imagine the disaster if that went away. So yeah, I don't see this being a plan. I definitely don't think they expected it to go like this.
I mean, that's like, I don't know. I have a little bit more, I think too highly of Western strategists to believe that they really thought that, their best case scenario was going to necessarily pan out. I mean, I'm sure they were hopeful. They were optimistic that Iran would fold, but, they had to have, understood that, what they were, the plans that they were implementing to get Iran would not have necessarily resulted in the best case scenario. And so they had to have planned for contingencies, and they had to have said that what's happening now was definitely something that is acceptable and worth the initial the initiation of the strategy. And so, and I think that it's true because, again, when we try and look from the perspective of the transnational oligarchs, what is driving them? Like, what is driving them to go after Russia? What is driving them constantly to, lie about China with their propaganda apparatus, to treat China like an enemy, to try and sink China's economy with all these sanctions and tariffs and things like that? Like, where is this coming from? And where it's coming from is the reality of a transnational Western global elite who are, worried about their, wealth, power, and privilege, on a global scale, being displaced by a growing powerful Iran, a growing powerful Russia, and a growing powerful China. Like, these are the threats to the freedom of the transnational Western oligarchs who, there is no difference in their minds between being free and being the hegemon, being the unipolar power, right? These things are the same exact thing. So they are fighting for their freedom to do whatever the fuck they want on our planet anytime they want. And the threats to that freedom are Iran in West Asia, Russia, in Europe, and then China in Asia. So these are the targets of Western imperialism. And there's the strategists that are deciding how the Western imperialists are going to deal with this. Understand that China, China is not going to be weakened without a, there is no way that China can be weakened without seeing a catastrophic effect on the global economy. And so they have resigned themselves to the fact that a global economic collapse is necessary. So this is the reality. So the Western oligarchs who, run the West and are, one of the most powerful forces on the planet, are pushing on purpose the world, to a global economic collapse. Now, if they can avoid a collapse and get everyone to surrender, Ian, they are happy to do that. They would just like Russia, Iran, and China to surrender. That's the best case scenario. But if they don't, they are prepared to, to cause a global economic collapse, to launch proxy wars against China, maybe in the midst of all our proxy wars against Iran and our proxy wars against Russia, they might initiate a proxy war against China. All of this because they hope that they really can damage China and emerge on the other side of this in a better position than China is. And they're going to count, like they did on World War II, on their two oceans and the hemispheric energy resources that they have access to, easy access to, that are not dependent on real long shipping lanes, real long oil tankers traveling 2,000 miles like China is, right? So they'll be dependent on domestic energy in our hemisphere, and that's what's going to protect them, and that's what they're banking on, is going to allow them to emerge on the other side of this conflagration that they are causing, on purpose. They're causing this on purpose because they think that these are the factors that are going to allow them to emerge in a better position on the other side of this than they currently are now. And they see that the trajectory that is going on now is not beneficial for them, and that if they don't do this soon, they're going to be screwed. And so this is the context within which what we see going on in Iran. And you're asking yourself, well, I don't see how this benefits the West. Like, how does it benefit the West to crash the global economy? And so I'm making the alternative case. I'm saying, you misunderstand what their interests are. You misunderstand how they perceive reality. You think that they care about the well-being of the people in the United States. You think they care about the well-being of Westerners. Well, they don't. They care about, their class, and they care about the wealth, power, and privilege that their class is able to, wield and maintain. And so they're happy to push the planet to a global economic catastrophe, because guess who is going to not struggle, in a global economic catastrophe? It's the billionaires, Ian. The billionaires are not going to be struggling. They have luxury bunkers. They have access to everything that they have access to now. They're not going to struggle. And you know what? Their bunkers are probably not going to be targeted by Iranian missiles or by Russian missiles or by Chinese missiles. Maybe, that's what they're banking on. So we'll see, Ian, if I'm correct. Time will tell. I expect that, we will see an initiation of an energy embargo against China. We'll see a proxy war, start rolling out against China, in the same way. They'll start small and they'll just escalate it. But I think we saw what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. The same thing is happening with Iran. I don't see any end in sight with that. Trump is talking about diplomacy because he's trying to manage markets, while he escalates. And so the question is Iran going to be able to, seriously harm, and threaten the U.S., power in West Asia? I mean, can they overthrow the monarchies? Can they put in place governments, that are friendly with the axis of resistance? Like, that would be really bad for the United States. Can they, destroy all the 14 military bases surrounding Iran so that the United States cannot use them to to project power in the region? These are all questions, but again, all of that will take years, and I don't see, any kind of solution. There's no diplomatic solution. I don't see Iran wanting a diplomatic solution. I don't see the West wanting this diplomatic solution. What the West wants is surrender, and Iran is not needing to surrender, and they're not going to. But okay, your response, Ian. That's a lot. I gave you a lot to ponder.
You did. And guys, I want to introduce you to our third panel member, Spaz. Say hi, Spaz. So he is a beagle. He's very attached. So when I'm here on the podcast, he will run up to my chair and make noise and stamp his feet and bark, making me mute my mic until I pick him up. So he's here with us on my lap.
He probably got anxious from my loud my yelling.
Well, he thinks you talk too much. That's what he said. That's what he told me. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't. Yeah. So he did get several comments. What a good dog. Yes, Pittsburgh dude said that. Daryl, hi dog. Skoidat likes the dog too. So everybody likes dogs. But to respond to what you're saying, okay, so you're not necessarily wrong. I don't think you're necessarily wrong. They see Iran as a threat. Maybe we can debate the reasons they see Iran. Why is Iran a threat? We could have a whole show just on that. Why do they dislike Iran so much? we could say it's Israel, it's, international Jewry, we could say it's a capital class, there's a bunch of different, theories, some better than others, but we can have a whole show about that. But, point is, they see Iran as a threat. So it's like we have to remove that threat. So on that, I agree with you. They could even see it, Iran is an ally of both Russia and China. So I think you're right on that also. Crippling Iran does have, at least some effect on China and Russia. If anything, it's just a loss of prestige for a Russian and Chinese ally to be destroyed by the USA and Israel, while Russia and China, let that happen. So that'd be, if nothing else, just a loss of, international prestige. They could say, oh, look, Russia did nothing, China did nothing. Iran was, obliterated, in 3 days by a special combat operation by Donald Trump and Netanyahu. It'd be a great...
Imagine the leverage he would have walking in with his meeting with Xi.
So I do think, that said, I do think that's what they thought was going to happen. They weren't exaggerating it. And, because the thing is, I see so many, because I've been outside the USA, I guess, for 4 years now. So sometimes I feel out of touch. What do Americans think? What do they believe? Sometimes I do feel out of touch, but on the internet, I just see, people, even people I know, like on Facebook, on Quora, on these other social media platforms. It just seems like everybody was actually truly convinced that, Iran didn't stand a chance against, American military might, and they were absolutely sure. Now, we don't know what the Pentagon told them. We don't know what these generals told them. We don't know what these military, these G2, those intelligence guys, we don't know what they told Trump. We don't know what they told Hegseth. We don't know what they told the, I forget even who it is now, the chief of staff at the Pentagon. We don't know what they told those guys. They might have been skeptical. We do have to look at the facts of the matter. That Iran is like a quarter or a third of the continental USA's land mass. It's very mountainous terrain, and the population's it's over 90 million people. If you look at past bombing campaigns, like even Serbia, which is tiny Serbia, in 1999, it was several months of bombing, and it didn't instantly obliterate the regime. It didn't. And so they have this very exaggerated idea of what air power can do, and it's just like there's no historical basis for them thinking that. It's just difficult to say, but I think ultimately they did actually believe, we could topple Iran in a couple of days, that people would rise up. I mean, their strategy does seem to reflect that. I mean, they bombed the south. They bombed these areas that had the most dissent, that had the strongest dissent.
These people you're describing, do you think if they realized that they couldn't do that they wouldn't have attacked?
I don't know what they did. I don't know what they would have done. I mean, it's like telling someone, it's like, what if you told Putin and Russia that Ukraine would not capitulate within the first couple weeks? What would that have changed? I'm sure that would have changed their strategy. Like if you went back in time to those guys, it's like, hey, I'm a time traveler. The special military operation does not,
No, I think that's a good analogy, Ian. I think that's a good analogy because what happened? So Putin initially went in with the hope, best case scenario, I'm going to let Ukraine know that we're serious, that we're willing to go to war over this. And hopefully they will realize that war would be not in their interest and they're going to capitulate. But if it doesn't, we are serious and we are prepared for war. And so, I think it's a similar thing, right? So you're hoping for the best case scenario, but you're prepared. If the best case scenario doesn't work, you're still pursuing your interests by launching the attack, and you're going to deal with whatever comes after how you have to. But so it's like the tar baby. Who did the Aesop's fables, right? Aesop's fables, the tar baby, and the more you touch the tar baby, the more you get stuck to it, and the more you get involved with it. And so that they just needed to the go, so once the go is in, that's what they want. And now they're gonna deal with whatever happens. And so sure, I mean, they wanted the best case scenario. They wanted Iran just to capitulate, just like Putin wanted Ukraine to capitulate. But that doesn't change the fact that they probably weren't certain that would happen. And even if they knew it wasn't going to happen, they were still going to attack anyway. And they were going to, enter into this conflict thing, because ultimately it is something that they felt they had to do, for geostrategic reasons. And I think it's for the geostrategic reasons that I tried to, give lip service to earlier in the program. But
well, I think
yeah,
you're right.
so
I mean, you're not wrong, but I think the difference is that the Ukraine operation was planned better, and so it was easier. I mean, yeah, so there were definitely, especially in that first 6 months, there were mistakes that I'm sure made. I'm sure there were things they wish they could go back and change if they could. But it was still planned out enough that they could go to plan B to plan C fairly smoothly. But the problem, what we're seeing in Iran, is it was so badly planned. It was so badly planned. I mean, it's just, I don't think they even, I mean, it's just like, there is no plan B, there's no plan C. And what we're seeing is the actions of someone who didn't have a plan B.
Yeah, no, and that makes me want to address, the nature of this power, right? Because Trump is the figurehead of a government which itself is owned by a class of people. And so, I think you might be right. Like, Trump might have been manipulated into doing this and given promises that it's that it's going to work out better than it has worked out. Trump might have been given assurances like that, but that just, all that does is demonstrates that the people who are really calling the shots saw things how I suggested they saw things, and that Trump isn't really the actual power. Like, these aren't his strategies. He's not rolling out his plan for global domination. Like, these are plans that have been think tanked for decades. And, you have the entire intelligent apparatus of the transnational oligarchs, figuring out how to do things. And so if they, figured that they needed to manipulate Trump into, initiating the contact with this tar baby, just because they know once the contact is initiated, it's, you're stuck and there's no going back after that. You've crossed the Rubicon, the die is cast, the dogs of war have been unleashed. There's no putting them back. And that's what they wanted Trump to do. And so whether or not Trump was given assurances that it all work easily and fine, that is inconsequential, really. I mean, as far as, understanding what's going on. And so, I think that the actual powers that be are happy that this is happening. Obviously, they don't want Iran to be strong. They want Iran to be easily defeated. But, they understand that they're prepared to engage more in defeating Iran. And again, I go back to the point that they are prepared to crash the global economy if necessary. And it is going to be necessary to harm China, to contain China, to defeat China, to reduce China, to weaken China. You cannot do that without having a global economic collapse, because China is integral to the global economy. They're the number one trading partner of almost all the countries in the world. Over 150 of the less than 200 countries that we have, China is the number one trading partner. They're the manufacturer of the world. So you're not going to harm them and their economy without causing a global economic collapse. And so would they like Iran just to surrender? Yes. But the fact is that they're prepared to adjust their strategy, and do whatever it takes to, to be in a position where they can control that oil and keep China from accessing the energy that they need. And so I think that's really the window of opportunity. We've talked about this before. The closing window of opportunity, what is causing the United States, the Western oligarchs, the West, to really initiate all of these things in rapid succession, seemingly out of nowhere, is their understanding that China, there's a closing window of opportunity to wreck China's economy because they are currently dependent on energy imports. And that dependency is closing fast. China is developing nuclear capacity. They're increasing their renewable energies. They are coal. They're firing up coal plants. So they are trying very quickly to reduce their on energy imports. And once they do that, the West is truly fucked. Like, we will not have leverage over them. We will not have the ability to just destroy them, without an actual, hot war that will probably destroy the planet. So they're hoping that before this window of opportunity closes, they can really cut China off from global energy before they are no longer dependent on it. So, and that's the window of opportunity that I believe Colby, what's Colby's name? The main anti-China hawk in the Trump administration, who's written a lot on this, and the think tanks who have written a lot on this, is this closing window of opportunity. So again, if they have to, temporarily, take all of West Asian oil energy exports offline, which is what they're doing, in order to be able to go after China's economy, they're willing to do that. And they were prepared to do that. They were hoping Iran would just fold, but they're prepared to just, have a huge regional war that destroys all the oil production capability. So when that happens, I'm going to say, I told you so. And I'm going to say it was planned from the very beginning. And I'm saying that now because it is going to happen. And I think a lot of people probably understood that there's a high likelihood of that happening, and they were okay with it. And they did what they're doing anyway. And they're trying to sell it. They're trying to manage it, in the best way that they can. You see Trump out there every day trying to manage and stabilize the oil market, because there's no sense, dumping the oil market, sooner than you have to. So, but we'll see. I'm fairly certain that this is the inevitable trajectory that the West is taking us, and it's going to be, I'm going to really enjoy. I mean, I'm kind of enjoying it now because what's going on now is easily predictable, and I've written about it for years. I mean, this is what is going on. This is the thing, and when you see it just playing out, pretty much exactly. So what I didn't see playing out, and I wrote a post about this recently, Ian, was that I'm kind of surprised of the mainstream media. I'm kind of surprised they don't have narrative control. I'm kind of surprised that the mainstream media has headlines that say Iran is winning and Trump is losing. I'm surprised to see that. I don't think it changes much, but I just kind of thought they would have more, more media control, and there would be a bigger coalescing of the, all of the factions of the Western oligarchy would be, more united in this effort. So it's a little bit interesting to see that they're really not trying to get the American people behind this, right? They're more blaming Trump for it. They're calling it a failure. They're calling it a collapse, and they're blaming Trump for it, which is interesting. I didn't really expect that. So do we want to go to comments? I've been ignoring comments because I'm too interested in what I'm trying to say to focus on comments.
Well, let's look at the comments. Yeah.
Dustin has a good question for you.
Okay.
Would you prefer the imperialists to have better plans, Ian?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I mean, yes, actually, yes. I mean, it's just like a smart person, because they have here's the reality, Dust. They have nuclear weapons. I mean, I would like to have a smart evil person in charge of the nuclear weapons rather than a stupid person in charge of the nuclear weapons, because I think it's very likely. I mean, it's a not zero chance that we have. I mean, we have two different nuclear powers directly involved in this war with Iran,
Yeah.
Israel, which is, and USA. So not one but two.
Yeah.
And I'm of the opinion that using a nuclear weapon is a Rubicon that people would be very hesitant to cross, because China and Russia, the other nuclear powers, even aligned nuclear powers like France, can't get in the habit of letting the USA nuke their allies. Right? It's like, oh, we don't like you. We don't like this ally, so we're just going to nuke him because we can.
You got a rare compliment from Dust, Ian.
Right, it's unusual, but we don't know. It's just, especially if they get desperate. I'm also of the opinion that a nuclear power will not lose an existential war without using the nukes. And right now, I wouldn't say the USA is losing the war, because there's a lot of cards the USA has not played, like ground invasion. I don't think they're going to sit, but they're not on a good track. If they don't, I just don't buy this idea that, oh, they'll walk away from it. Like, even I saw like that viral tweet from Trump saying, oh, we would, well, that wasn't, excuse me, it wasn't a tweet, it was a headline. It was a headline that Trump allegedly would be fine with ending his special combat operation without reopening the strait. Well, that's nice. I'm sure that does good things for oil prices for Trump to reportedly say that, but I don't see it happening, because that would be just such a huge disaster for American prestige. They have to escalate. They have to escalate. In what ways can they escalate? Nuclear weapons are, of course, the most extreme escalations, but we have some smaller escalations they could do before that. They could do, one of them is strikes, more directed strikes against our Iranian infrastructure, water, electricity, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, that invites retaliation of the same. Yeah. There's other things they can do, right? There's probably some things we haven't even thought of that they could do. But I think all those cards are going to be played, because they can't lose the war. It's and it's actually, there is a similarity to Ukraine, in the sense that we can play Monday morning quarterback and say there were peaceful options, or there were diplomatic options Russia could have done before militarily intervening. Right? We can make that argument in hindsight, but once they had crossed that line, they were kind of stuck with it, right? Because when you're a nuclear power, when you're a great power, you can't lose a war. There's certain wars.
It would have been the collapse of
Russian government. Disaster. It would have collapsed. It would probably collapse. Yes. So they're stuck with it. I think with Iran, it's the same thing, because especially because we look at it, it's just so ridiculous. Especially because Iran literally just wanted to reinstate the Obama nuclear deal. And they had the fatwa, they had the religious edict against nuclear weapons development, and that sort of just looking, it's like, why did it's so ridiculous. But
no, and I mean,
that war, now that they're in a war, the USA has to win. They can't duck out of the war without winning, and I think that's a very serious crisis for us all, because the USA's nuclear weapons, Israel's nuclear weapons, they have all this military force. They haven't even begun to apply yet. It's like, how far are they going to go? And I'm making the argument that there's not a limit to how far they would go, because it's like, at this point, it's existential.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what I wanted to say from the very beginning of your commentary is that the United States must. I mean, I shouldn't say the United States. The transnational Western oligarchy must see themselves in a very difficult position. They must be desperate. This is a result of desperation, and why is it desperate? Because you don't when you open this Pandora's box, you don't control what happens, and you can't stop. You literally cannot stop the high probability that Iran can produce nuclear weapons and use those nuclear weapons against Israel. And so the question is how how what is the adjective? How much in of a catastrophe do you think your situation is to risk, because you're risking it, to risk Israel getting hit with nuclear weapons? And so yeah, and again, I think we have to understand things from the perspective of the class of transnational pedophilic billionaire oligarchs, right? It's like these are the people that are driving the strategy, and these are the people whose interests are being pursued, right? So if you think in liberal terms about a national United States interest, you're not going to know what the fuck is going on. Nothing is going to make sense to you unless you understand, that there's a class dynamic that is driving these events, and it has nothing to do with the quote unquote national interest of the United States. Like, these are the nonsensical lies and justifications that are dreamt up by the oligarch class, disseminated by their propaganda apparatus, to get stupid people to go along with them. But the reality behind all that is that it's power politics and it's class politics. And the Western oligarchy they perceive themselves to be in such a desperate, the word I couldn't think of earlier, desperate situation, that they're willing to risk all of their proxies and vassals, Ukraine, Israel, the Gulf states. They're putting all these things on the table in a gamble, that they're going to be able to come out, they're going to be able to cause this conflagration and come out the other side in a better position than they currently are in. And so they must feel as if their current situation is desperate. There is no other explanation for why they would do what they are doing, and having this high probability that in one of the 27 or 37 underground missile factories, missile cities in Iran, that they're going to develop some nuclear weapons. And obviously, if Israel uses nuclear weapons against Iran is a big fucking country. Israel's tiny. 4 or 5 nuclear weapons will forever destroy Israel, whereas Iran can absorb that shit. So, again, it points to an existential threat from on behalf of the transnational Western oligarchs who are pushing all of this. If they're willing to be so desperate to engage in this kind of thing that they really can't control. Now, they're hoping they can control it. They're hoping to have an easy victory. They're hoping Iran folds. They're hoping that, China ends up being no stronger than Venezuela, right? You just land some helicopters, you grab Xi and you pull them, and China's been taught a lesson. That's the best case scenario. But I don't think a lot of people really, the people that are devising these plans and implementing these plans really think that that's probable. I think they're prepared. They are prepared for a global economic catastrophe. And I agree with you. They're prepared to cross the nuclear threshold. They're prepared to cross, that red line and probably use nuclear weapons against Iran. And they're probably prepared to see the entirety of West Asia get destroyed, because number one, the oligarchs themselves are going to be just fine in their luxury bunkers. And we, as the United States, the economy here, we're not dependent on West Asian energy exports. The global economy is, but we're not. And so we're changing the global system. We're destroying the interconnectivity of the global economy, and we're understanding that we don't need it. The United States itself does not need the global economy. The idea is everybody else is going to get harmed far worse than the United States is. If all of West Asian oil and energy goes offline, it's going to affect others and not us. So Trump just tweeted, I was reading this morning on Telegram. Trump is like, hey, you guys can buy oil from us, or you can fend for yourselves. This is the new normal. So that's a paraphrase. He didn't say it's a new normal. He did say fend for yourselves is a direct quote, and he did say you can buy oil from us. So again, it's not a catastrophe. It's an expected outcome. It is a strategic expected outcome from the perspective of the people who have been planning this, that all of West Asian oil is, all of West Asian energy production is going to go offline. So, and again, none of this is going to happen unless they feel themselves to be in a desperate situation. And I really think they are. I'm going to assume that Dust's good point to you was to me. Make me feel good about myself. Ian, you're frozen again. That's all right. So I am repeating myself. I'm harping on the same thing over and over. And I think that's so big. That's so big. I think it's important, to focus on the big picture and on, the reality of a transnational Western oligarchy that uses governments and uses states to further its transnational oligarchic interests, to the detriment and in opposition to the interests of humanity, of all of us. And so if people understood that, things would make more sense. And I understand, Dust. I get that. I was making a joke. Thank you.
You're not allowed to make jokes around here, Billy Bob. But no, I mean, I don't know. It's just, it is. I mean, it's just hard to imagine anybody. I mean, who? It makes more sense. I mean, it literally makes more sense if they go. It's Israel is it's Israel pulling the strings. Even the most far right, Jews control everything. Conspiracy theory makes more sense than thinking, oh well, it's the capital class wanting to destroy the world economy. Because I just don't think he maybe. I mean, do you understand how? Not even just for the regular people. I mean, I know they don't care about the regular people. They see how devastating that'd be for oil companies, for agriculture, for manufacturing, for basically any industry. If the Middle East,
what's the advertising slogan? What's the slogan to sell it? Short-term pain for long-term gain, Ian. Long-term gain will be the unrivaled unipolar power throughout the rest of the 21st century. We'll have subdued China. We'll have subdued Russia. We'll have total reign, total freedom over the planet. Like that's what they're pursuing. And but yeah, no. Look, go ahead.
I mean, let's look at it from the Israeli perspective for a moment. I mean, let's just cut out the USA for a minute. Just look at it from the Israeli perspective, from the Zionist perspective. I mean, don't you think there is a lot of desperation in that camp right now? Because global opinion has, in the last 20 years, but the last 5 years especially, turned on them. In the USA,
yeah,
for the first time since, I guess, the 1970s, the majority opinion's against them. And literally every American demographic groups except white, middle-aged and elderly, like over 50, Christian, Republican voting white males are basically the only group left that they have a majority of support in. If we wait another 10 years, I don't think even AIPAC is going to help them, because it's just like everybody who likes Israel is dead. If basically everybody who likes Israel is old and dead, they're not going to get no matter how much influence they have. If just everybody who likes you died already, they're not going to get those billions of dollars. They're not going to get the unconditional military support. They're not going to get all that. They're not going to get it anymore. Don't you think it's logical from that perspective to say, well, guess what? We have maybe at most 5 years of support from the USA left. We need to use that to defeat Iran, which is our main regional enemy, and creates Greater Israel. Doesn't that make sense from that perspective, what they're doing right now?
Well, I think certainly people think in those terms. I think there's people out there thinking those thoughts. I don't think those people are driving events. I don't think those people are calling the shots. I think people out there that think like that exist.
You
They're
don't think
Israel first people.
you don't think Zionists are driving in Israel. You don't think they're the dominant power in Israel.
I think that it's the same people that control the United States control Israel. And I don't think it's an ethnicity. I don't think it's a religion. I think it's a class, right? So I don't see Israel as really separate from the United States. It's like it's one global oligarchic empire, and they are utilizing all of their assets, to mount this attack against humanity, to establish themselves throughout the rest of the 21st century as the global hegemonic power. And so Israel is being used. The United States is being used by these people, and these people are not loyal to Israel, and they are not loyal to the United States. They are loyal to their class. I mean, that's the best way to understand it. Are you okay? You just blinked. I thought you were frozen for a second. So that's my perspective. Now, and again, there are people who are loyal to Israel, and they want a greater Israel, and they're loyal to their tribe, and they want they want to use the U.S. to benefit them, like they've been using the U.S. for a long time. But again, I don't think that those are the shot callers. Those aren't the drivers of events, and strategy. Just like Ukrainian nationalists, right? There's real Ukrainian nationalists that want to use the United States to, nuke Russia and defeat Russia on their behalf. But those people are not the ones that are calling the shots. They do not control the Western oligarchy. So the Western oligarchy, they're loyal to their class. They use these nation states as proxies to further their class interests. And any other perspective, I think, is fundamentally flawed insofar as it ignores that reality, and it focuses solely on nation states and national interests and all these concepts that really are meaningless when we talk about the reality of class and oppositional class interests and class struggle and class war, which is what's going on. I say that this effort by the Western oligarch elite and their empire and all of their vassals and the United States to subdue the rest of the world, to maintain themselves and establish themselves as the global hegemon. That is how the class struggle manifests itself today. The class struggle in 2021 is manifesting itself today as resistance to this effort by the Western oligarch elites to conquer and subdue all the nations of the world, under their hegemony. So I don't know what a better what a more thoughtful or more sensible approach to understanding what is going on. I don't know of a more a better one than that. And so in fact, I'm very disparaging of people who want to talk about Israel has occupied the United States and it's getting the United States to do what it wants. Like, that is just so ineffective and unappealing and nonsensical as an explanation.
What if we asked, what if we asked just in private, like not even as a journalist, just like in private, it's like maybe as a friend, as a drinking buddy. We asked some of these major Israel supporters in the 1%. Like, let's say we asked Sam Altman, or we asked Leonid Radvinsky, who just died of cancer. He was the founder of OnlyFans, and he's one of Israel's biggest supporters. If we took these billionaires, these Zionist billionaires, and you asked them, how do you feel about Israel? Would you care if Israel fell? Or would that be important for you for Israel not to fall? I mean, it's just
Well, how about we ask him, are you prepared to sacrifice Israel, in order to attain the global hegemony which you really care about? And again, you just rebuild it.
It's just, I don't think that's even actually a true statement. If you asked a Jewish billionaire, would you want Israel to fall in exchange for, this capitalist, oligarchy or whatever? I'm sure they would say no, because they're Zionists.
They would say short-term pain for long-term gain. And guess what? The long-term gain, in the long run, you can just, once you have global hegemony, once you've subdued your adversaries, you just build whatever you want. It's the new Marshall Plan. It's the new post-Soviet era, where you're just the unrivaled global hegemon. And so again, they don't want to sacrifice Israel because they don't want to lose. But what they're interested in is not enlarging Israel. They're interested in, now, sure, enlarging Israel is a strategy for their global domination, for their aspirations for global domination. But the point isn't to enlarge Israel. The point is to attain global hegemony, subdue the threats to that hegemony, which are Iran, Russia, China. And, and so Israel is going to be a pawn that they're willing to, weaponize and sacrifice to the greatest effect possible in furtherance of that hegemonic objective. And so I don't know. I don't see any other explanation or alternative framework to understand reality coming anywhere close to being as accurate and reality based as that. But I know that's a tough sell because most people have no idea. Their entire lives they've never talked about a transnational oligarchy that is hell bent on using individual nation states to pursue their class interests. And because again, any kind of thought like that, well, that's communism, that's Marxism, and we know that that's evil, and that ends up in starvation and death camps. So it's a challenge to educate people and to get them familiar even with this alternative concept that all of their lives they've never heard and been told is wrong and stupid. But I think it makes sense, right? Like sensible people can hear what I'm saying and they can evaluate that, especially in light of current events, in light of what's actually happening. How else are you going to explain what the fuck is actually happening that makes any kind of sense? Why does Europe just take, its energy being cut from Russia? Like, that's not in Germany's national interest. What the fuck is going on? Well, it's because, the idea of a national interest is stupid. The national interest is divided along class lines, and the wealthy ownership class of those countries don't have a national interest in mind. They have a class interest, and they have a global class interest. And so they're willing to, destroy their national interest if by doing that is going to help their global class interest. And again, this is how they use states, right? This is how states are used, how states are sacrificed in this bigger game of, hegemony. And again, who are they fighting against? They're fighting against nation states that are powerful, nation states that are predicated on understanding the reality of imperialism, understanding the reality of a transnational oligarchy, namely China. Like, China gets this concept of imperialism and class struggle, and China is predicated on that, and that's why it's a threat. That's why it's a threat to the imperialists, because what China is doing, what they've been doing since their existence in 1949, is developing themselves to displace the power of imperialism, to displace the power of the transnational oligarchs, in order to really, better humanity and create a better reality than that is under the tyranny of transnational oligarch elites, who are also pedophiles, by the way.
Well, I think. Well, who's our guest speaker we have from Nepal sometimes? Indy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Sri Lanka. Excuse me, Sri Lanka.
Daryl, you got under my skin, Daryl. You frustrate me. So no, I'm gonna have you on. We're gonna have a conversation. We can have a conversation this weekend, maybe, if you want. Because yeah, I wanna engage with your racist fascism. Like, there's no other word to say it. But the thing is, no, I don't condemn him for his racist fascism, because he really believes it, right? So he's a true believer. And so if you are truly honest in your beliefs, like, I can't condemn you. I want to educate you and explain away your ignorant racist fascism. And I don't I don't come down like in a condemnation, except for the ignorance, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I get that he really believes what he's saying, and so then I get frustrated trying to what is the word?
I mean, here's a good. I mean, I want to finish my point though. What Indy was saying, because Indy,
yeah,
our friend from Sri Lanka, he said, it couldn't really, the European perspective on Russia, and it's not even a financial one. He just thinks, this is the thing he said on this show, Indy said on this show, he just thinks that they really hate Slavs. They just ethnically hate Slavs, and they're willing to, sit in a cold apartment without heating because they hate Slavs so much. And I think that there's national interest, and then there's ethnic hatred. Now, with that,
who has the ethnic hatred?
Well, the hatred of Slavs is
who hates Slavs?
Western Europeans, Scandinavians to some extent. I mean, definitely Scandinavians.
So I'm just to clarify. I mean, so you've already gone. You're already rejecting my paradigm of a transnational oligarchic elite that is, pursuing its transnational oligarch class interests, and you're going back. Hold on, Ian. You're going back to a liberal framework, and you're trying to understand why the United States as a nation is supporting Ukraine against Russia, and you're saying it's motivated by a hatred for Slavs. Just to understand the framework that you're working in.
Well, I think the issue here is like you want one motivation for this to be the only motivation, and it's like, well, more than one thing can be true. You can have a person can have more than one motivation. I mean, a billionaire is still a person. A poor person and a rich person, they're both still people. They have brains. They're the same. They're the same species. So you talk to a poor person, and he says, well, I believe this, I believe this, I believe that. The same thing with a rich person. Why can't a rich person be truly an ethno-nationalist or a Zionist or, whatever, non-money related motivation? Why can't a rich person have other motivations besides money? Why do we have to insist, rich people are only motivated by money? Why do we have to believe that? Why is that?
Well, so I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm providing a comprehensive framework and explaining events within that framework, and I'm trying to understand what you're saying in response. Because so it sounds like you're rejecting my framework, that the primary objective of all of this is hegemonic global domination over the world, and to subdue these intransigent nations who have sovereignty. So the West, the ruling class, does not want sovereign nations, and so it's attacked. So, but you're saying that, and so, well, I'll agree with you. Again, I agree that certain people are probably motivated by Slavic hatred, and there's probably Slavs in Ukraine that are motivated by Russian hatred, and there's all kinds of people who have all kinds of ideas and motivations. But I'm saying what is responsible for the huge geostrategic upheaval that we're seeing, and we're going to see a lot more of it, and we're going to see a collapsed global economy, and all that is what we're going to see. And I'm telling you why we're seeing that is primarily because there's a Western oligarch class that has to destroy the rivals to the impediments, words fail me. The impediments to their freedom, to their hegemony, which is the sovereign states. And so when you bring up ethnic hatred, I'm just wondering, what is the framework within which you're explaining this to me? So, I mean, are we going back to nation states and certain governments are being motivated by Slavic hatred? Or are you saying the transnational oligarch elite themselves don't care about global hegemony? They just care about killing Slavs. Like, it doesn't make sense. So I'm trying to make sense of your framework that you're using. But I do understand that.
Well, we just look at what we observe, what we observe with our own eyes and ears. And I actually want to go back to this comment about 10 minutes ago from Daryl. I think this sums it up good. So he basically says you get more flack for calling America Zog, Zionist occupied government, than you do calling it a billionaire oligarchy. And I think this comment's true. I mean, you can go on an American campus and say, I'm a Marxist Leninist. I like the Soviet Union. I could wave a hammer and sickle. I can say, eat the rich, down with capitalism. You can say that stuff on an American campus, but the minute you stand up and say, from the river to the sea, down with Israel, America's a Zionist occupied government, you can't say those things. You will be expelled. You'll be put. I mean, that's what happens to even the the pro-Palestine. Those people. I mean, most of those students. I mean, God bless their hearts. Most of those students who protested in favor of Palestine were leftists. A lot of them openly identified as Marxists, and they had gotten away with those things. They weren't punished for those things. But the minute they put on those scarves and said, free Palestine, down with it, they said, the minute they started doing that, they were expelled. They were put on do not, like the billionaires, the Jewish billionaires, made a do not hire list. Those people are permanently blacklisted from ever being hired in any major corporation in the USA because they participated in a free Palestine movement. I mean, cannot we not say there's some ethno-nationalism going on here? That's not just capitalism. You see what I'm saying here?
I mean, you're making the same point over and over again, and I'm responding with the same point over and over again, which is, there's, all kinds of people have all kinds of ideas, and
but I mean, you have two ideas. I mean, so why does one get these people black? Why the same students? Yeah, I mean, I assume like a very stereotypical, very
okay. Let me do my best. Let me try and contextualize what I see this conversation being. So let's take because I don't agree with some of the things you're saying. So most people are liberals. Okay, most people are liberals who are indoctrinated in liberalism. They have a liberal framework, and they're only able to see things through the liberal lens of nation states, etc. So as a socialist, I see things through the lens of class. So I see a global transnational oligarchy who has owns certain governments and owns certain states and uses those governments and states, both the domestic policies and the foreign policies, to further their class interests. This is the big driver. Now, if you're a liberal, you don't see that. Liberals, by definition, ignore the reality of this oppositional class interest. They ignore the reality of a transnational oligarchy that's loyal only to themselves and has no loyalty to the actual states that they control. And therefore, liberals are only able to understand things in terms of nationalism. And so if they see the United States doing stupid things that doesn't benefit its interests, its national interests, but it is apparently doing things to benefit the interests of another nation like Israel, the liberals' only possible explanation for that is that this little country must have occupied this big country and is controlling it. Like, that's the only thing that their framework will allow them to see, because they're using a liberal framework that fundamentally ignores and rejects other aspects of reality. So, and here's the thing: you want to say, and this is what I disagree with. You want to say that this Zog is what people get shut down for, and that what I'm saying is fully given an open hearing. In my experience, every single analyst on alternative media that is worth anything, right, that has legitimate criticisms and is trying to say things correctly and is critical of the United States, they do so from a liberal framework. And all of them, Jeffrey Sachs, John Mearsheimer, all these, Napolitano, everybody in the alternative media sphere, even Max, and I think Max knows better because Max has to be a Marxist-Leninist, you would think, but they all are saying that Israel occupies the United States. So they're all liberals. They're all using a liberal framework, and none of them are saying what I'm saying. And so I just reject this framing that one thing is permissible, which is my thing, and the other thing, Zog, gets censored, because that is not true at all. You look on social media, anybody who's worth listening to, insofar as they're way, way, way better than the establishment press, are all saying Zog at the top of their lungs. And that's what frustrates me, because it's stupid. Like, they're using a stupid liberal framework. They're coming with stupid liberal conclusions to what must be happening. And it's dumb because it's detached from reality. So, again, you can only understand things when you reject liberalism. You understand class struggle. You understand that the ruling class, the ownership class, has no loyalty to any state. They're loyal to their class, and they are doing things. They're happy to sacrifice individual states, Europe, Russia, Ukraine, if it benefits their ultimate class objective of attaining global hegemony and destroying their enemies. So no, I don't see anybody saying that, Ian. I see me saying that. Nobody is saying this clearly, explicitly, in a sensible way. Everybody is saying Israel must control the United States. So I just reject the premise.
Well, I mean, Skoybat. Okay, thank you, Skoybat. I'm glad somebody on the show agrees with me. So
okay,
Skoybat says, am I wrong? Ian is saying there are people who have influence and power who have different motivations outside of their specific class interests. Thank you. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying
who denies that? I've already agreed with that a couple times, Ian, and it doesn't contradict anything I'm saying. I agree that what you're saying is true, but it's not a rebuttal to anything I'm saying. It certainly doesn't contradict anything I'm saying.
Okay.
People have individual interests. Ukrainians, want the United States to destroy Russia for Ukraine. They want greater Ukraine. They want Russia broken up into 1,000 pieces. They want Ukraine highly enlarged. A lot of people in Israel want the same thing. There's some Ukrainian people in the United States government who want that too. There's some Israelis in the United States government who want that. But that is not the driver of what is going on. So, the overarching driver of what is going on is what I've been explaining, over and over. And I don't want to belabor the point. I don't want to explain it more time.
You're not belaboring the point. Maybe there's just a misunderstanding. I mean, because people who are in favor of NATO and U.S. hegemony will make a similar argument as Marxist-Leninists who are big on, class purity. That is just class interests. It's motivating the empire. They both, because when I asked, these very, NATO-oriented, these very Pax Americana-oriented people, I asked them, well, isn't it possible for these other groups like Cuban Gusanos or Poles or Israelis, isn't it possible for these groups to come to America and influence American politics in bad ways for the USA? And they say, no, it's not happening. Well, I think it is happening. I think it's not just a Jew thing. It is a Jew thing when it pertains to Israel and the Middle East, but there are Poles, there are Cubans, there are Iranians who come to the USA. They're this single issue group, this block of voters who are single issue. That's the only issue they care about. And they focus all of their energy and money and fundraising, et cetera, to lobby for that specific thing. So I don't think, even when you remove, Israel and Jews from the debate, just in general principle, isn't it? I mean, you can actually have something working against U.S. interests. Even if you're just a capitalist, you're like, I want what's best for me as a U.S.-centered capitalist, what's best for me. Well, you can have these groups that are pushing for things that are against the USA's capitalist interests, because they're motivated by that particular thing. That's like their main motivation. So you have people saying we have to attack Iran, we have to attack Iran. You have people from Eastern Europe arguing we have to attack Russia, we have to attack Russia. You have these Japanese and maybe Filipino or Indonesian people who come to the USA and say you have to contain China, you have to contain China. So you have all these different groups and they're all pushing for something like that, but it's not just a capitalist conspiracy. There's not like this capitalist hive mind saying this is the central plan for everything, if that makes sense.
So yeah, no, if you'll let me address that. I mean, so I think the United States is the headquarters, right? The United States is the headquarters of the global, Western oligarch class. And they're the headquarters because of the economic and military power of the United States. And so, and there's an intelligentsia, there's a strategy component of the oligarch class that exists in the United States and develops, plans and strategies. And it works to form a consensus about how to proceed, about how to move forward, with, the interests and threats and challenges that are being faced on the planet by the oligarchy. And so, yes, there are competing and overlapping factions within the oligarchy. There's innumerable factions, right, that fight amongst themselves for access to power and for a furtherance of their own factional interests. Like, this is what happens. But ultimately, there is a process with which a consensus is formed, and a lot of that process has to do with the administration that gets put in place in the United States, because the United States is the headquarters and it's got the military power and the economic power, and it can set the policies to pursue a particular agenda. And so again, I don't see the idea that there's individual lobby groups and there's individual factions as that's part of the reality. Again, it doesn't it's not a contradiction though to what I'm saying. It's an elaboration of the reality. Reality is complex, and there's you can't explain the totality of reality in a few sentences. And so I'm explaining reality in a certain way, and you're elaborating on it correctly, but it doesn't contradict what I'm saying. So exactly how the consensus is developed, exactly how they end up deciding what actual policies. But here's the thing: if you have individual, and we know this, right? If you have individual factions who are ruining and are waging war mightily against the consensus strategy, against the consensus project, they will not hesitate to destroy those factions. So if the Cuban gusanos in the United States started doing something that goes against the consensus interest of the ruling oligarchy, they would be dealt with. They would be silenced in the same way that JFK got silenced. So once the consensus is made, once the consensus is pursuing its objectives, any threat to that, even if it's from within their own an oligarch faction, is going to be dealt with. And they're going to deal with it, in any number of ways. Lead poisoning, like JFK, just telling them, hey, threatening. They could just threaten them to, hey, knock it off. We're done. So this is just the reality of class governance. And the same thing is true if you have a working class dictatorship. The same thing is true if you have a it's a problem, because it is difficult to get everybody on the same page, and eventually you're going to have to you can't let a small minority get in the way of the objectives of the majority. And so this is just the reality of reality. And again, socialist countries have the same problem, right? Socialist leaders have to decide, what policies to pursue. And if individual workers object and want to try and obstruct that and get in the way of that, you have to deal with them, right? You can't just let them upend, the plan that is necessary. So this is just the reality of how the world works, and it's inescapable, right? So you're accurately pointing out, you're correctly pointing out that you're not going to get 100% buy-in from the strategy that's going to be pursued by the capitalist class. There's going to be outliers. There's going to be people that object, that say, no, we should do something else, that aren't going to be happy with the plans that the consensus has decided upon. And guess what? If those minority factions are able to network and get a majority, you'll have an interclass conflict, and they're going to go to war with each other. And then there's going to be a winner, and then that's the policy they're going to pursue. I mean, that's just how, that's the Hegelian dialect, problem, conflict, resolution, problem, conflict, resolution. So, I don't think what you're saying is wrong. I agree with you. Okay, we got comments. Christine, would either of you comment on the Russian tanker with oil for Cuba? That is an interesting discussion. I want to hear what Ian thinks about that. I'm kind of surprised. I don't understand why. The U.S. has been blocking any ships, and then all of a sudden you hear that this one lands. Was this weakness by the United States? Was it altruism by the United States? Like, I can't explain it. What do you think, Ian?
It's very strange, yes, because there were actually two tankers, and there was one tanker with natural gas that diverted, changed course. That tanker changed course, and that just seemed like the end of the discussion. Okay, Trump and the U.S. Navy threatened those tankers. Russia backed down. That's what it looked like last week, and then out of the blue, the second tanker, which had the oil, actually successfully made it to Cuba. It was a 180, and I think Daryl's comment's probably the correct one. Back toward you. I think there was some discussion that happened, and there have been other confrontations. There have been Russian flagged tankers seized in the past. So we can't. So I'd say the final answer is we don't know. Something happened. We just can't know exactly what it was. But there was some very high level discussion between Russia and the USA, and that was the final verdict. That tanker was allowed to pass. So it is surprising, and I guess it's not going to solve Cuba's problems because it's a country of 10 million people. So I don't know how. So it's 750,000 barrels of oil.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know how long that's going to last. So maybe a month, a couple months. I don't know how long that's going to last. It's not a trivial amount, but it's just at the end of the day, it's just one tanker. So
I wish we were able to know, what the deal was or why the United States did not force that, militarily force that tanker to leave. I'm not sure what the calculation was. I wish we did, but we don't. But what we do know with certainty is that the United States, and really, again, owned by the transnational oligarchy, has been waging a war against the people of Cuba, ever since the people of Cuba overthrew the brutal despotic dictator that the West had, put in place in charge of Cuba. And so, we've been at war against that country ever since. We've been sanctioning them, embargoing them. And it needs to be made clear that sanctions and that embargo is not just the U.S. The U.S. goes after any state or any political entity that tries to do business with Cuba. And so it's really a global embargo against Cuba with very few exceptions. There are exceptions, very few exceptions. And it's cost the little island of Cuba billions and billions and billions of dollars, throughout the time that it's been going on. And yet people in Cuba are still far better off than their neighbors who have had no embargo. And to me, again, this just proves the superiority of socialism to capitalism, because Cuba would be far worse, even with the embargo, if not for the revolution. So Haiti, Dominican Republic, even Jamaica is not doing that well. And you look at life expectancy in Cuba, you look at education, you look at healthcare. All these things are really good despite this brutal blockade. So, but Trump is just really escalating it. he is showing how evil he is, and then the people of Russia are, of course, showing how not evil they are by trying to alleviate the suffering, that's being afflicted by the United States at the behest of the transnational oligarchy that owns them. Ian, we're an hour and 40 minutes. I don't know how much longer we want to go.
Have the last word because I need to.
Skoidat's accusing you.
Oh, maybe I'm just being too generous, Ian, because I'm used to being aligned with his position. Well, I don't know if I have a particularly cemented position right now. I just make observations. I'm not moored to any particular position right now, so I'll maybe that's the best description of me right now. So Dust says Code Pink organized hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of aid to Cuba, and a near 200 plus people delegation visit to Cuba, and more to come. So yes, and I think that's actually a very effective tactic. And I say this as someone who left the USA and went to Russia. People get so, I mean, I don't even have words to describe how mad people get that an American went to Russia. Even if it's just not moving to Cuba, just visiting, quote unquote bad countries. So I'm not even telling you have to move to a different country. Just visiting a different country and being public about it is a good thing, and it makes these people furious. It's actually so satisfying to see how furious these people get. Like when you visit, like I saw, I don't remember who it was, but there was some streamer who came to Cuba and posted about it, and I saw that post today, and people were getting so mad. It's just because that's their main talking point. It's like, oh well, if you love communism so much, you love socialism or whatever so good, why don't you go there? And so when you do actually go there, and you find that the regime didn't kill you on the spot for going there. It's great. It's just great to go to Cuba and say, hey, look, it's just normal people.
And they're sacrificing tremendously, and I feel so bad, and I hope that they don't feel like they have to do something that Venezuela did. I think Venezuela was really threatened. I can't really condemn Venezuela for capitulating. It sucks. Again, it shows the evilness of the United States. But who am I to demand that Venezuela just sacrifice and go to war and all the government get assassinated? Like, I'm not going to condemn them for not doing that. And I'm not going to condemn the Cuban people if they say, hey, enough is enough. We can't hold out. We're in the same hemisphere as these motherfuckers. They're too powerful. Like, I really, the people of Cuba deserve a lot of credit for holding out. And I hope they can continue to, because their future is bright, because, the United States isn't collapsed, but the United States can destroy them. And I think, they can threaten them with destruction. And, so we'll see how that goes. I hope they don't come to an agreement like Venezuela did, but it's possible. It's great for Dust to point to the organizations, that are doing legitimate good work. And even if they're coming from a liberal framework, even if they don't understand the transnational oligarchy, even if they want to blame Israel for all the world's problems, if they can do good and they can, resist and spread awareness and resist, what the United States is doing, which is really the global international ultranational oligarchy. Anyway, but yeah, Medea Benjamin at Code Pink, she's always being accused of being a Chinese front group, which is funny because, of course, anybody that resists the United States effort to destroy China and have a global conflagration, World War III, and a total global economic collapse has to be working for China.
A Chinese agent, yes.
Yeah, there's no other way around it. Ian, we're going to reconvene on Friday. I have a lot to say. There's probably going to be a lot of new news to come on Friday. Check out Ian's blog. Read his most recent article on this topic of, comparing the Strait of Hormuz with really comparing World War I with what we're seeing early on in World War III. It's an interesting article. Anything else, sir, before we depart?
No, it's a good ending note.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us. We had a lot of live viewers. We had a lot of great comments. So thank you, everyone. Spread the word about the global international oligarchy that just controls states and uses them for their purposes. That is the appropriate framework to understand reality. And no, Israel has not captured the United States, is not using the United States to further its interests. That's not the big picture. That is not the big picture. On that note, we'll see everyone Friday. Thank you. Bye.